I talked about Stalin a few days ago. Let's talk about Khrushchev today. Some people say that Khrushchev is just not good at it. He is actually an honest man. So let's take a look at whether this honest man is honest or not. Let's get straight. The charges of criticizing Stalin in Khrushchev's top 20 secret reports can basically be perfectly pinned on his head. Khrushchev was a perfect boomerang in his life. Let's talk about the Great Purge first. Khrushchev's most severe criticism in the secret exposure was that Stalin mistakenly launched the Great Purge, but in fact, Khrushchev himself was the main force in the Great Purge and the pioneer of the whole people's arrest and execution. It can even be said that he rose to the top by the Great Purge. In the whole movement, he is more radical than anyone else. In 1930, when Khrushchev served as the secretary of the party group of the Institute of Technology, he was a master of the whole person. As a leader in the Institute of Technology, he is known for his active anti-rightist stance. Khrushchev said in his memoirs, "Almost all the people I worked with were arrested and disappeared." He portrays himself as the victim of the Great Purge, but the survivor forgets to tell everyone that he is the executor and perpetrator of the Great Purge. Khrushchev helped arrest and eliminate his colleagues and friends. Of the 38 senior officials of the Moscow Provincial Party Committee and the Municipal Party Committee, only 3 were spared. In other cities in Moscow, 146 party secretaries and 136 people were suppressed. In May 1937, 63 people entered the Moscow Municipal Party Committee through normal elections. It seems that the official fortune is prosperous, but in fact, most of them have fallen into the trap of the Great Purge. 45 of them were wiped out. Similarly, 46 of the 64 members of the Moscow Provincial Party Committee disappeared. As soon as the Moscow Grand Trial was over, Khrushchev led the Moscow Party Committee to Red Square to organize a speech. He made a high-profile speech. "All enemies who try to stop our march to the victory of communist society will be crushed and wiped out by us. We should be more vigilant and intensify our work in all aspects of socialist construction in order to eliminate and eradicate all remnants of these despicable murderers, fascist agents, Tulowsky elements, Genevieve elements, and right-wing conspirators. The object of our struggle is sitting next to you. They will greatly appreciate our success and the achievements of our party, but at the same time, they will secretly pull the trigger in their pockets and wait for the opportunity to shoot sinful bullets at you. The way to treat such traitors is to beat them up. Our hands must not tremble. We must run over Khrushchev from the corpses of the enemy for the benefit of the people," which is exactly the result of the radical entity farm and the Great Purge policy. After the death of Stalin, he advertised himself as a conscientious hero against the Great Purge. Khrushchev later criticized the cult of personality in various ways. In fact, he is also one of the initiators of the cult of personality. The sanctification and idolization of Stalin is what he is trying to promote. He published an article in Pravda that year and said, "Comrade Stalin's greatest achievement lies in his brutal struggle with the enemies of the people, the Menshevik social revolutionaries, the Tulowsky elements, the Genevieve elements, the Bukharin elements, and the bourgeois nationalists, defending the purity of Lenin's scholarship and the unity and steely unity of our party." Khrushchev called Stalin his biological father, a wise mentor, a genius leader of the party and the Soviet people, as well as workers all over the world. Later, some people said in their memoirs that Stalin actually opposed the cult of personality many times. But some people at the top took advantage of the leader's old age and illness to forcibly give him all kinds of fleshy titles, using the name of the leader as a blessing. After the death of the leader, he did not criticize the cult of personality, put all the mistakes down to Stalin, and portrayed himself as a victim. Stalin himself resented being deified by others. Once he saw someone else's biography of Stalin, he complained that there were too many mistakes. "All doctrines are said to be mine. It turns out that I still have the doctrine of communism." See how they write. It is said that Lenin only talked about socialism, not about communism at all, and communism is what I talked about. Please, I'm just a student of Lenin. I was taught by Lenin, not by me. We have the doctrines of Marx and Lenin, and no supplementary doctrines are needed. Stalin also stated that he would burn down the Stalinist strategy of blowing himself up. There was no Stalinist model when Stalin was alive, and only after Stalin's death did there be a Stalinist model. When Stalin himself was in power, the policy was very flexible. Everything starts from reality. The rigidity of the Soviet system actually came after the death of Stalin. Of course, the hat of the later rigid Stalinist model was buckled on Stalin's head because the deceased Stalin could not speak. After the death of Stalin, the cult of personality in the Soviet Union was pushed to the extreme. It's just that the object of worship is not Stalin, but Khrushchev, who criticizes the cult of personality. When Stalin was alive, there were only a handful of mentions of Stalin's name in the newly revised concise course on the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. In fact, Stalin himself opposed the cult of personality and the inclusion of his name in party history. However, in the Khrushchev period, the history of the Great Patriotic War, published by the Soviet Union, was full of Khrushchev's name. And at that time, Khrushchev was just a commissar of the Imperial Army. He made 4 times as many appearances as the commander of the Front Army at the time, and even made more than a dozen appearances. Then the Supreme Commander Stalin. Could it be that the Great Patriotic War was commanded by Khrushchev? Zhukov, the military god of World War II, has only appeared twice in this war history. Who is less than a fraction of Khrushchev? Greedy for heaven. Khrushchev, who was number one, did not allow others to challenge his authority and status. Just after Khrushchev issued a secret report, completely denying Stalin, many comrades were very angry and disgusted. Starting on March 4, 1956, the demonstrators in Timiris chanted slogans such as "Down with Khrushchev," and took to the streets to demonstrate. However, on March 10th, the Soviet army dispatched live ammunition troops and tanks to disperse the parade. Troops clashed with the demonstrations. Eventually, the soldiers fired into the crowd. There were hundreds of casualties, and more than 200 people were arrested. In order to turn Stalin down and smelly, in order to maintain Khrushchev's own authority, they actually pointed their guns at the people. Khrushchev's secret report also caused huge ideological turmoil in the socialist camp on a global scale, and it can be said that it directly destroyed the foundation of the Soviet Union as the big brother of socialism and the leader of the communist movement. After the secret report, the Communist Party of the United States ushered in the largest wave of withdrawal from the party. The U.S. government is ecstatic. After U.S. Secretary of State Dulles saw it, he happily said, "Khrushchev's report is the atomic bomb that blew up the communist world." On March 10, 1956, the English translation of Khrushchev's secret report was published in full in the New York Times, and it spread throughout the capitalist world for a while, becoming the best weapon to vilify socialism. The U.S. side never expected that such a fool would pour dirty water on the leader who created his country and ideology. This is tantamount to wielding a knife and a gun to do things that are painful for the lighter and quick for the enemy. No matter what the Americans are doing, they dare not openly discredit Washington, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. People know that this is the foundation of the beacon of freedom, but Khrushchev dared to do so for his own personal gain. In fact, since Khrushchev completely rejected Stalin, the foundation of the Soviet Union has been dismantled, and all legitimacy has been shaken. The Khrushchevs never thought that you would portray Stalin as a tyrant and dictator. So what are you Stalinist comrades-in-arms and comrades-in-arms? What is the entire Sipsu? However, Khrushchev at the time had no idea. He was only immersed in the pleasure of the conspiracy to succeed and the monopoly of power. He combed his glorious image everywhere. He smashed leather shoes at the United Nations General Assembly, engaged in kitchen debates in the United States, and had a great conversation with actress Monroe. The author and the United States have become the dream of chickens and rabbits to rule the world together. In the Soviet Union, Khrushchev was even more domineering and domineering above everyone. Khrushchev was extremely keen on pomp and his personal respect. While watching a performance in the Grand Theater, he walked into the box and deliberately allowed the entire hall to see him. The audience applauded warmly, and he bowed graciously in return. At this moment, he noticed a person in the first row who had been sitting still. Liu Xiaofu was extremely angry at the time. The next day, he called this person, "What are you doing? Do workers show me disrespect? I have sciatica." Zhukov explained helplessly, "I know your sciatica." Khrushchev said viciously. Then the meritorious generation of military gods, Zhukov, who was very gracious to Khrushchev's rise to power, has since become a retiree. Khrushchev has a poor theoretical level and doesn't like to study. His personal talents are very mediocre. He takes things for granted by patting his head, and his style is simple and rough. For example, his corn movement in the Soviet Union. He was fascinated by the high yield of corn in the United States, and blindly studied the large-scale planting of corn in the United States. Regardless of the geographical and climatic factors of the Soviet Union, he decided to plant corn in the entire Soviet Union. However, because the geographical conditions in the Soviet Union were too poor, mainly due to poor temperature and light, corn hardly formed sticks, coupled with the corruption of state institutions. And ultimately the labor and the people hurt their money, causing real and huge damage to Soviet agriculture. Under Khrushchev's enthusiasm for corn, the party secretary of Ryazan Oblast in the Soviet Union, in order to cater to his animal husbandry, wanted to catch up with the ambitions of the United States and falsely reported indicators. For this reason, all livestock in Ryazan Oblast were sent for slaughter, and meat was purchased throughout the country to complete the task. But it still fell far short of the target. The fraud was exposed, and the suicide of the party secretary became a famous scandal. Khrushchev is the one who has no culture, puts satellites, is impractical, engages in the Great Leap Forward, and condones pomposity. In the end, Khrushchev was also overthrown in a coup. On October 14, 1964, at the meeting of the Central Presidium of the Sipsu, the outgoing Khrushchev delivered his final political speech. He said with tears in his eyes, "All of you here have never openly and honestly pointed out any shortcomings and mistakes of me, and always agreed with me and expressed support for all my suggestions. You also lack principle and courage. Look, is he an honest man?"